everybody, Ben Woodard here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite topics on earth, which is camels and camelids. I've loved camels since I was a kid. I know they look weird and gangly and lerpy, but I love them. I love them exactly the way they are. I think they're incredible. Now, camels have been around for millions of years. Camels evolved in the Americas. This is a skull of a camel from the Eocene. This is called Pobrotherium. This is a camel about the size of a dog. It's not very big. That's how big they were. They got bigger as time went on. So the Eocene is about 27 million years ago. By about 10,000 years ago, you're in the Ice Age, and camels have gotten to the size that they are today. Remember the rule of the Ice Age: any animal alive today was around during the Ice Age. So the camelids that we have today on the planet, those were here during the Ice Age. But we also had others. In the New World, we had over 20 species of camels. 2 of them were as big as giraffes, like Titanotilopus and Gigantocamelus. These things were huge, and some of them had saber teeth. Now, all camelids in the front do have fangs, and on the males it's more pronounced, but some of these giant Ice Age American camels, they were like this long, as big old huge fangs used when they spar and when they fight. Now, you're probably used to the fact that a lot of animals will fight. You'll have deer that fight for dominance, bighorn sheep, rams, butting heads. Well, there's sort of kind of some ritual fight that goes along with it. There's sort of rules of engagement. Not with camelids. Camelids of all kind, from the tiniest to the largest species, they fight in every way that works. They don't have antlers, they don't have horns, they do have little fangs, but they get brutal in how they fight, and they trip and they bite, and they try to emasculate each other. They do like insane fights with each other, and there's no rules. It's some of the wildest fights that you will ever see in nature. So we had camels of all kinds here in the New World, and then they radiated out into the world from the Eocene onward. But then the New World, we only have a couple left now. But in this video, I don't want to talk about the prehistoric stuff. I want to talk about the modern camelids. So we have 7. We have the Bactrian camel. We have the wild Bactrian camel, which I'll get into what that means in a second. The dromedary camel, the llama, the alpaca, the guanaco, and the vicuna. Now, technically, all of these are closely related enough that they can be crossbred. Some do it on their own. Llamas and alpacas regularly do crossbreed. Some have been with testing with artificial insemination that has been done. So they're that closely related. So all the camelids of the world, they're pretty neat. We're going to start with the biggest. The biggest is the Bactrian camel. The Bactrian camel is the 2-humped camel, and it's usually very woolly, very shaggy. It can live in extreme deserts or in very cold environments, and often that is one and the same. The steppes of Siberia are incredibly hot in the summer and at night, and incredibly cold in the winter, and the Bactrian camel is built for that. Now, we owe a lot as humanity, civilization, to the Bactrian camel. Bactrian camels were the original semi-trucks, the original trains. This is what people used to haul goods. Think about it. If you're going to go 50 miles away or more, and you have some trade goods that you want to trade to the big next community miles and miles away, if you're carrying yourself, you've got to carry your food, your bedding, and your water. That alone is going to, and whatever weapons you have to defend or protect yourself. So what about if you're trying to also carry trade goods? Well, having a beast of burden allows for that. And the dromedary camel, the Bactrian camel was domesticated by people for the purpose of hauling goods. Now, they can be ridden, but they are not as conducive to being ridden upon as the dromedary camel. Bactrians are more of, again, like a freight train. They are more utilized to haul things. So they've been domesticated. They've been utilized by humans for thousands of years. We have ancient petroglyphs of two-humped Bactrian camels throughout China and South and Asia, and it's pretty amazing. Now, that brings us to the wild Bactrian camel. Well, isn't that just a Bactrian camel living in the wild? No. So if you have an animal that is domesticated, and then some individuals run off and are living in the wild outside of human control, they're not wild, they're feral. Because humans, through selective breeding, change the morphology and the behavior and the appearance of an animal. Take a look at dogs. All dogs genetically can interbreed with wolves. All dogs, even your Chihuahua, were selectively bred from wolves, okay? So our selective breeding has made the Bactrian camel. But there are also wild Bactrian camels that have never been domesticated. There are wild Bactrians that are living wild but are not wild, they're just feral. And there's some that are wild that have never been domesticated. They look a little different. They behave very different. Their behavior and their rituals and how they live and how they fight and how they mate, very, very different. The wild Bactrian camel is an endangered species, but again, another magnificent creature. So those are generally considered to be the biggest camelids alive today. They pale in comparison to the giants of the Ice Age, but these are camels of the Ice Age. The Bactrian camel was around during the Ice Age. It survived to modern day. But there are bigger versions of camels that lived alongside of them that are now extinct. Okay, next is my favorite camel of all, the dromedary, the good old-fashioned one-humped dromedary camel. Dromedary camels are adorable. It's big old weird floppy faces and one hump, gangly as can be. All camelids are gangly, but if you are more of a desert specialist, you're not as fluffy. And so the gangliness shows. Bactrian camels are as gangly as a dromedary, but they're fluffier, and so you don't see it. Dromedaries, you can see it all. They are just long and wiry, and anywhere you have muscle movement, like of your shoulder or your legs, that movement of muscle generates heat. So you don't want any fat at that joint connection. And so all the way up, camels look very gangly to dissipate heat as they're out in the desert. But when these dromedaries lay down for the night or sit, which is called the couche position, then they are sitting in a position that traps in their heat, because the hottest deserts of the Sahara in the day are some of the coldest deserts at night. And so they've got to be able to handle both extremes. Now that hump stores energy, and they also have a lot of water. They can go days and sometimes even weeks without getting a drink. So they are desert specialists. All the dromedaries on planet Earth today are the domestic variety. We have no wild dromedaries left. Now, there are many wild living populations of dromedaries, but again, these are feral, they're not truly wild. So there is a domesticated Bactrian camel, and some of them are living feral, and there's the wild Bactrian camel that have never been domesticated. There are dromedaries that are domesticated. There are some dromedaries living feral, but there are no wild dromedaries anymore anywhere. They're only feral populations. The largest population of feral dromedaries in the world are ironically in Australia, which they're not from there. People brought them over in the 1800s to build the railroad across Australia. They would haul these giant railroad beams on camelback and laid it out. And then once the railroad was built, it was kind of like, well, we don't really need these guys anymore, and they set them loose. And now the biggest population of feral dromedary camels is in Australia. Now these have a rich history with humanity also, just like the Bactrian, going back thousands of years. Again, these were beasts of burden, but they are much easier to ride than a Bactrian camel. So dromedaries are good for going long distances, they're good for hauling and carrying things, and they're also good for transportation, which is really good because crossing sand dunes is not easy. Now, if you look at the toe, this is the skeletal toe of a dromedary. And if you look at this, you can see it's pretty narrow, but you see it's kind of flattened out on the bottom. Well, in addition to this, a camel has a fatty pad over each toe that splays out kind of like a snowshoe. So when dromedaries are walking across sand dunes, they don't sink down in, and you have a better transfer of energy. So you're not just wasting your energy. You're just like snowshoeing across the sand dunes. So they really have evolved to be the perfect large desert herbivore. They're incredible. I love them. I love to ride them. I love to work with them. I've not trained my own dromedary, only because I haven't had the land to do it. But I have worked with them, and I have helped in training them, because in America, most of the people who train camelids have horse background. They don't have camelid background. And so they try to force horse training techniques on an animal that is not in any way, shape, or form related to a horse. So I love them. Hope I get to work with one someday. And again, this is arguably the most iconic of all the camels. Now, the next camel is a New World species. We're going biggest to smallest here, and that is the llama. The llama is a domesticated animal, and it was domesticated from an animal called a guanaco, which is the animal we're going to talk about next, okay? So guanacos are one color. Humans selectively bred llamas for two reasons. Number one, for their fiber. We don't call it wool. Wool is different. Wool is structurally and chemically different than the hair of camelids. So we don't say it's llama and alpaca wool. No, it's llama and alpaca fiber. Their fiber is very warm, very insulative, and incredibly good for weaving and making ponchos and all kinds of different things, ropes and clothing. And so these were selectively bred for individuals that were woollier, or it's not wool, but furrier. Same thing with sheep. You know, you look at wild sheep, like you look at a bighorn sheep, and it's like, oh, okay, it's a bighorn sheep. Well, humans selectively bred those into domestic sheep for their wool. So first and foremost, llamas were domesticated for their fiber. And secondly, they were domesticated as draft animals. They are good for hauling things. They're just a little too small to ride on properly. You know, every once in a while, I'll see like pictures from like back in Victorian times when llamas were novel and new, and you might have some lady riding a llama, but they're not built for that. They're really good for doing like a one-person carriage, a single axle one-person carriage. They can do that, but their back is not built to handle the weight of a human on, which is really unfortunate because I would do anything to ride a llama around. They have a nice flat back. They're perfect. They're perfect, but humans are just a little too big. So a llama's rich history with humans, domesticated in South America. Again, we had types of camels all the way up into North America during the Ice Age, but we don't have any records of humans doing anything other than killing and eating them. But in South America and in the high Andes, people domesticated them. These are incredibly nimble animals. They have tiny, tiny little toes, and they're nimble. I love to train these and work with them. Llamas are a joy. They're fun. They're intelligent. And if you train them right, they're goofy. They have a fun personality, and you can bring them in anywhere. I bring them in houses and buildings, and it's not like a horse or a cow where they just poop everywhere. They want to go to the bathroom in a specific spot outside, and so you can just bring them in. I would tour them through the museum, and they'd look around and have a fun old time. So llamas are great for packing, for carrying gear, and they're great for companionship. They're great for guarding the rest of the herd. So if you have a whole herd of llamas, you're going to have one that's going to be a little more dominant guard. But if you have sheep and you have one llama, that llama will take charge of that flock of sheep and will guard them and will chase away coyotes and chase away cougars. They're really remarkable camels. And we should call them camels because they are a type of camel, but we don't. So I love llamas. We've selectively bred them into just about every color pattern under the sun, but that's not what they started off as. Which brings us to our next camelid, which is the guanaco. Guanaco is the wild form of llama. They are uniform in size. They are uniform in color. They look like a beautiful dreamsicle. They're kind of orange fading to white. And depending on which region you find them, they might be more orange. Their face might turn a little bit more black. Just regionally, they're a little different. But they are not super shaggy in their coat. They have a longer coat in the winter to keep them warm. And in the summer, it gets a little shorter. But it's not like a llama. Llamas keep growing, 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 and you have to shave off that fiber every year. Otherwise, it gets to be too much. No different than on sheep. So guanacos, they're really nimble. They're a little smaller than llamas because, again, we selectively bred llamas bigger for fiber production and to carry heavier, bundles that we had them carry. But not guanacos. Guanacos are nimble and spry and fast, and they can bite and fight and dance, and they're so incredible. I've worked with them only a little, and I desperately hope that I will someday have the chance to train a guanaco. Obviously, it will be a little bit harder than a llama because llamas have been selectively bred. Just like dogs, it's easier. I have friends who've trained wolves for movies. I train animals, and I've trained birds of prey and stuff. So, and what I found is that training a wolf is a lot harder than training a dog because we've selectively bred dogs to be more agreeable. And similarly, we have selectively bred llamas to be more agreeable than guanacos. That being said, most every llama I have ever encountered in the United States has not been trained properly. And so people are like, oh, they're mean and they spit. My llamas have never, ever, ever spat once on a person, ever. You train them right, you treat them right, and you celebrate and respect their intelligence, and they will go far. So guanacos are another South American species, and again, we probably had guanacos in North America as well during the Ice Age. The fossil record seems to indicate that, but we haven't for, 500,000 years. So they are South American species. They're doing well. Their numbers are great. They're beautiful. And again, uniform in color and not overly shaggy. The next one down in size is the alpaca. Now, alpacas look like cartoon characters, and we had, a year or two ago, this random trend where girls in my state all wanted a painting of like a long, skinny painting of a big alpaca neck with these little ears sticking up and a wreath of flowers on its head. It was a random trend, and if you're watching this 10 years from now, you're going to be like, what on earth is he talking about? But it was a big thing, and suddenly everybody became obsessed with alpacas. Well, alpacas are adorable. They've got snub little faces. Compared to a llama, their ears are a lot shorter, their faces are more snub, and they were only selectively bred for their fiber. Only. They were not selectively bred at all to be pack animals. They're very small. I've trained many of them. They were selectively bred from the next animal we'll talk about in a minute, which is called a vicuna. But they have the finest and most highly valued fiber on Earth today. And so why they were selectively bred? Vicunas, you can only harvest their fiber like every third year. But alpacas, just like a llama, you can do it every year. Now, alpaca fiber is very fine. It's not as fine as a vicuna, which is where they came from, but it's harvestable every year. So alpacas are fluffy, they're adorable, and they're fun, they're goofy. However, they are not the best animals to work with. Now, I used camel and llama training techniques on my alpacas. And I was able to train them to lead them around. I was able to train them to pack. I've never known anybody else to train pack alpacas. And I would bring three. I would bring my llama, my favorite llama, and two alpacas and have them all carry gear. And we'd go up in the mountains and haul stuff. It was a lot of fun. But here's what I found. The llama kept and retained all the training and the information. But alpacas, you had to do training sessions and little pack sessions every single day. If you did it this day and you didn't do it this day it was like starting from scratch. If you did it every day, they were consistent. They were skittish, they were mean-spirited, they liked to fight. They were still adorable, and I still absolutely loved working with them. But what I found is that alpacas, again, llamas have a much greater intelligence and a much more cheerful disposition because we have selectively bred, we humans in South America, selectively bred llamas for human interaction. Hey, I'm loading you up, we're hauling stuff to go somewhere else. Where alpacas were selectively bred, you're just in the fields eating, and once a year I'm going to round you up and I'm going to shave you off and gather up that fiber to use to make all kinds of fiber art and weaving and stuff. So they have stayed far more wild. They've stayed very, very skittish. By size, they're much lower on the food chain, so understandably they're more skittish, but humans have not done any favors to selectively breed them to be more amicable and more friendly. So alpacas are adorable, and with work, they can be good to work with, but nothing like a llama and nothing like a camel. Which brings us to our last camelid alive today, which is the vicuna. The vicunas are the smallest, they're tiny, they are adorable. Now, this is one that I have not worked in any way, shape, or form. All the rest of these I have worked with in some shape or form. I haven't worked with vicunas at all. Vicunas are very rare. I think in the wild they might even be listed as endangered now because their fiber is so fine and it is so valuable that people, and it takes so long to regrow that people, you know, through the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s would kill them and just shave off all the fur off of a dead animal and put that on the market. And so their numbers tanked. So now they're protected and people are protecting them and now people are breeding them and people are also, now remember, vicunas were selectively bred into alpacas, but they are making a hybrid between alpacas and vicunas that can, because remember, a vicuna, you can only harvest the fiber once every 3 years. Alpacas every year. So they're making a hybrid between these two, even though they're technically all the same species, but they've been selectively bred to have different traits. So, so vicunas themselves are tiny and they are incredibly skittish. If you ever see photos or videos of them, they're usually always running. It's just kind of like modern day pronghorn antelope. You see them, they're usually running. They see you, they're like, ah, run away. They're low enough on the food chain that eagles eat them, which is kind of interesting because I mentioned earlier, this tiny guy, this is about the same size as a vicuna skull. Vicunas are a little bigger than this, but not much. So this is a camel that, you know, 27 million years ago got eaten by eagles, and we still have one that small today, and that is the vicuna. Vicunas still get eaten by eagles, like golden eagles and black-chested buzzard eagles that will eat them from above. And then there's predators down below like coyotes and cougars or pumas that will stalk them and hunt them and eat them. So they have to be very skittish and they're always worried, always stressed, but they're gorgeous. Now, guanacos and vicunas have the same coloration. So remember, guanaco were turned into llamas. Vicunas were turned into alpacas. So guanacos and llamas both have big, long ears, big, long faces. They might be woolly, but big, long ears, big, long faces. Vicunas and alpacas and vicunas, they have much shorter, more rounded ears, a bit more like a dromedary camel, and a much more snub, shorter face. And they're more nimble and just wiry build. So these are the camelids that we have on Earth today. 7 absolutely amazing and beautiful creatures. We overlook them. So again, from biggest to smallest, the Bactrian camel, the wild Bactrian camel, the dromedary camel, the llama, the guanaco, the alpaca, and the vicuna. I love them all, and I wanted to share and make a video out to talk a little bit about them. I love to do videos going more in depth, but you got to start somewhere and have a framework. So I hope you enjoyed learning about these incredible species. If you haven't already, if you could hit subscribe to the channel, I very much appreciate it. Helps me keep things up and going. And always remember that life is a gift. So never stop learning and never stop exploring. We'll see you next time.